Sent by Alexander Sem in the Telegram channel chat, officially the Waldorf Astoria hotel building was constructed at the end of the 19th century. As usual, it is attributed with a touching story about how two brothers were at odds, but then each built their own mega buildings and connected them to each other. The main message of this story focuses on emotions and feelings to distract people from realizing that a building like this should be built by an industry, not just two private individuals. With its rotundas and spires, this building was fully autonomous and powered by atmospheric electricity. It was demolished in 1929 to make way for the Empire State Building skyscraper. The fact that the building wasn't constructed at the end of the 19th century means it's antediluvian. You can spot it in the niches where the tall window arches appear and in the fenced-off area showing the underground floor. At that time, they kept excavating the lower floors. The first and underground floors, both tall, were built that way, unlike today's shopping areas, which are usually single-story. But back then, most likely, these were living quarters for giants 3 to 4 meters tall. Probably, the 20th century skyscraper was later built on the foundation of this building, which was originally constructed with a large safety margin. It could even support the 102-floor Empire State Building, which is nearly half a kilometer tall. Immunity Tables sent a video with this kind of French electric lighter from the 19th century. It's a hollow cylinder and inside there's some cloth soaked in oil. Occasionally oil is added to the container where this lighter is stored. For ignition, up until the early 19th century, high-voltage static electricity was used, which at that time was universal and free. Now, to get this static electricity, you need to convert 220-volt alternating current. Here's a continuation. This is an amazing video from Antarctica. There has long been debate about how such stone fibers are formed, creating the stump of some giant structure. Some believe that this is how plastic masses of future stone were squeezed out of the earth. It's unclear how such perfect fibers were formed. Others believe these are the fibers of a giant silicon tree that grew during the era of the scorching earth. Or maybe it was huge, but it was an ordinary tree which later bent and turned to stone, although ordinary trees don't grow with such fibers. And someone later cut it down, or rather sawed it down, and there are many such formations all over the world. Since this was found in Antarctica, it suggests the climate or conditions there matched those elsewhere in the world. Sent by Roman. This news tells how biomass in the form of brain neurons is used as a processor. Most likely, this is just a joke video, if not a fake, since it's hardly possible to power and connect a piece of brain in this way. But everything is heading that way, and it will eventually be implemented. To get an analog of a real biological creature, you'll have to recreate all the other body parts, receptors, and so on. How does nature implement this? But for an infernal entity to inhabit such a pseudo-biomass, the organism can be limited in its functions. All of this is part of the details and stages of the cyborgization process, which, according to the plan announced by futurist and Google Chief Technology Officer Kurzweil, is expected to happen by 2038. Here on this map we can see how oil and gas transportation was organized at the end of the 18th century. Here, more than 3,000 kilometers of this system are shown, which was set up at least in the northern hemisphere of Eurasia. Numerous pieces of evidence in the form of artifacts remain from it today. Oil was not used for energy production at that time. As we now know, almost anything can be made from it, including food. According to researchers, in the previous civilization, the Earth's population could have reached up to 60 billion people, and they had to be provided for. It is also possible that there was interplanetary communication, which made oil an incredibly sought-after product. Earlier, there were already theories that the name Tartaria referred to a territory where oil was extracted. Everyone says that cities ending with berg were logistic centers for oil extraction. Also, from that era, the word bourgeois has come down to us, meaning berg, jouy, oil eater. It returned to common use during the years the communist idea was implemented. The transportation network had transfer oil pumping stations that looked like star-shaped fortresses. Presumably, such angular shapes of star-shaped buildings and fortress cities were used for structures that generated a large amount of energy. Here is the continuation of this transportation system, which exists both on the map and as an embankment. This is the Great Zavolzhskaya Wall from Samara to Almatyevsk. In fact, its traces are found for up to 2,000 kilometers. It's symbolic that it starts, or more likely ends, at a distribution system called Alexeyevskaya Fortress. But we already know that for historians, anything unclear is either a religious temple in the name of Christ or a fortress. Does anyone here already know why? Why were permanent angled outlets made in this embankment? They serve as compensators for the expansion and contraction of metal pipes during temperature changes, just like it's done in heating systems. And since such embankments are dated by historians to be 1,000 years old or more, we place their construction and use outside the historical period, or rather, before the beginning of the biblical era. Here is a time-consuming but very simple calculation. From what altitude do satellites take pictures from space? Unfortunately, this blogger couldn't find the author, and the original channel used official satellite photos which, according to official data, are known to travel through outer space at altitudes from 200 to 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. He searched and found the photographed locations, compared the scale, and discovered that in all cases the Earth's surface was photographed from a distance of 8 to 10 kilometers, and the supposedly flying satellite in each case was actually inserted using Photoshop or computer graphics. We rule out the possibility that satellites can hover or fly at this altitude because this is the altitude at which airplanes fly. We know for sure there's an atmosphere there and you can't reach pre-space speeds at that altitude. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, after receiving complaints, he's not the first to point out this forgery, found an excuse saying that this effect occurs when filming at high magnification using lens zoom. However, the blogger insists, and common sense also suggests, that no matter how far the camera is from the satellite and the Earth, the size of the satellite relative to the Earth will remain exactly the same. But in this video, another researcher, a photographer, disproves his claim. He filmed with a long focal length, making the object appear smaller as it neared the cabinet, which looked larger. And in this way, he exposed the blogger's lack of knowledge about the properties of shooting with a long focal length. But if we delve into the specifics of shooting with a large lens, we'll realize that he didn't point out the fact that this effect is based on a wide aperture. That's when you can create this effect with closely positioned objects. And this cinematographic technique is well known. It's called vertigo, or dolly zoom, or the Hitchcock effect. In order to achieve this effect at distances of 200 to 400 kilometers, the lens would have to be about a kilometer in size, but in our real case, it's immeasurably small. And no matter how much we zoom in or move the satellite-Earth surface pair away, in all cases it will remain proportionally the same size, just as it should be with a minimal aperture. That is, in space at great distances, we won't be able to bring the image of the satellite closer to the Earth using a zoom lens and aperture. Well, and if someone calls himself a photographer and has a camera with a big lens, he should know about the properties of optics and shooting techniques. Let's note that all opinions on this matter can be double-checked with facts and the absolute truth can be established. But usually an ordinary person doesn't have time or opportunity to double-check this. Sent by Slava. I watched your video about anti-gravity engines, and I have to say that they all work on the principle of electromagnetism, which once again proves the point. The mass of objects is not due to gravity, but because of their electromagnetism. The formula for gravity, F equals G times mass 1 times mass 2 divided by R squared, was derived from Coulomb's law, where charges were replaced with the masses of objects and the force of attraction was replaced with the force of gravity. Naturally, the greater the mass of an object, the more charges it has that are attracted to the surface of the Earth. There is no evidence that the force of gravity works, even though technology has long since reached the point where gravitational attraction could be measured with high precision. But it still hasn't been detected, whereas Coulomb's force has been confirmed experimentally. Therefore, devices lacking fuel generators and anti-gravity should only be found in electromagnets and electromagnetism. Yes, indeed. Many researchers claim that all laws originally have universal formulas. For example, Aitsukovsky claimed that the behavior of ether can be calculated using gas dynamics formulas. Or for example, the behavior of liquid in pipes can be calculated using Ohm's law, which is applied to the relationship between current, voltage, and resistance. In fact, the flow of liquid can be described by the same parameters, where current is the flow rate, voltage is the speed of the flow, resistance is the diameter of the pipe, and power is the amount of liquid pumped depending on these parameters. Physicists will quickly dismiss such ideas as quackery, since other environmental physical factors would affect the liquid's behavior, unlike when current flows through a conductor. However, the answer to this is simple. Fine, let's just take into account the corrections and additional forces acting in each case, but the fundamental laws will still remain universal. Who separated them and presented them as completely different, and why? That's a topic for another discussion. The same applies to inventing dozens of disease names that arise from just one cause. It's the same with computerization. Many software bugs remain unfixed for decades, and soon operating systems will use terabytes. It's as if the creators of information systems don't set the goal of optimizing algorithms at all. This should lead to faster calculations and a reduction in the amount of stored data, as well as speeding up processes without the need to increase processor speeds. This is proven by third-party manufacturers who have no obligations and no reason for unjustified complication of software products. And I should say that this situation generally prevails in all everyday and scientific fields. Sent by Cosmo, ancient structures underground unearthed by a tractor. What can a conspiracy theorist see in this amusing case? First of all, looking into the distance, no one would suspect that there might be a settlement hidden underground here. Such a possibility cannot be ruled out if it was located in a lowland. In the buried room, we see rich decorations and an arch on the left, which must be at least 2.5 meters high. And this means that if the building is one story, the depth of burial is 5 meters or more. Again, this brings us back to the historian's argument about the cultural layer. How could such cultured people, judging by the decoration of the room, have so unculturedly filled the entire valley with the waste of their lives, burying themselves under uniform soil? All across Earth, even in the most unexpected places, in such buildings you can find not only household items, but also all sorts of high-tech devices from the antediluvian civilization. In the legends of different peoples around the world, there are stories where a national hero discovers the staff of some ancient god and performs many heroic deeds. He defeats armies, fights for peace throughout the owl, and goes down in the history of his people as the conqueror of something or the conqueror of new lands. Apparently, this continues until the Inquisition arrives, takes the staff, and restores everything. Nikolai messaged the Telegram chat New Reality, Moscow, underground floors. Let's focus on this two-story house. Here, a concerned and savvy comrade enters from the end and discovers that this house has another buried basement floor. Then he goes further, looks down, and discovers a second basement floor. It's not certain this second basement floor is the last. There could even be a third. And these typical buildings are all over Russia, and people live in them, not even suspecting that there is 1, 2, or even 3 more floors underneath them. So originally, this building had at least 4, maybe even 5 floors. This is a typical 18th century 4 or 5-story building. Here's just an interesting fact. It shows how powerful the flash is on new smartphones. When you focus a light beam of such strength, soon you'll probably be able to put some kind of barcode on a person or damage their retina. And here, there's a theory about why smartphones have so many cameras, assuming this video isn't fake. The camera has an autonomous power source and can send information to the network on its own. Then the purpose of the extra cameras becomes clear. First of all, people like this kind of abundance, and they will want to buy such smartphones themselves, where the more cameras, the better. These cameras can have a built-in power source and can be recharged simply through contacts or wireless charging when the camera is inserted into its designated slot. And such a camera constantly streams the image via Bluetooth when it's available or via Wi-Fi even when the smartphone is turned off. Well, as we know from randomly taken images, you can, for example, create a 3D model of the room where the person is, see what they're doing at the moment, recognize faces, people, and the places they visit. And here's another observation from Nikolai. Here's an interesting fact. Flame doesn't cast a shadow because it has a different nature or state of matter, the so-called plasma. Of course, the shadow at SpaceX could be explained by the exhaust smoke from the turbopump of an open-cycle engine, but as we know, this type of combustion isn't used in jet engines. The SpaceX program has been caught many times faking real flights using graphics. It's likely that it was created for a completely different purpose within the framework of the official worldview. This observation was sent by Slava. Procedure room boards list radon's benefits and available procedures. More details coming. I have a Radex RD1706 device. It detects beta, gamma, and X-ray radiation. Radon emits alpha particles when it decays. Radon is a gas, while radium is a solid, and the essence is the same. You can't detect it with standard testers that measure radiation, and it's the standard tests that check whether the radiation is harmful or not. Normal is up to 0.3 on the device. Near the radon treatment rooms, it's 0.13, and in the bath, it's 0.07. What did you find in the search? During the complete decay cycle of a single radon atom over several hours, 3 alpha particles are released. Alpha particles have low penetrating ability. Even a sheet of paper, clothing, or a layer of skin can stop them. From old newspaper clippings and other information on the radio. As we can see, this was used everywhere in everyday life and in medicine. But then all radiation suddenly became harmful. I don't think people in the past were so foolish, such fools, that they would kill themselves with something harmful, just like now, before releasing it to the masses. And besides, with such a wide range of users, it's checked multiple times. And on this topic, there's a video on the channel about how radiation was used to generate thermal energy. 1 bar of this radioactive rod could provide a family with energy for about 50 years, in a samovar, an iron, or a lamp. And of course, the radiator is also where radium or another radioactive material is placed.